I think it's pretty clear that Jeff Grimes stepped into the facility and realized, wait a minute, we've got 3 elite receivers and Jalen Daniels is our quarterback. Let's throw the ball. Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible. Paying heed all the way through. Beware of this podcast. That's right, this is a paid podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, along with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible. Remember FDIC and the Kansas Jayhawks. They're 1-0. Beat Lindenwood. Shocking, I know. Breaking news. They win for KU over Lindenwood to start the 2024 season. We'll be talking about all of that and more on today's show, recapping that game at Tula Mercy Park on Thursday night. As always, if you like what you're hearing or watching, if you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to leave us a like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. Share your thoughts in the comments as well on YouTube. You can also hit us up on the Mint Mobile hotline at 913-407-6524 to share your thoughts. Kevin, we actually got a special shout out on the Mint Mobile hotline from none other than Kobe Bryant's dad. So shout out to Kobe Bryant's dad sending us a text on the hotline. And thank you so much to Kobe Bryant's dad for tuning in as well and supporting us also. So people who are like Kobe Bryant's dad, send us a text. I know you've got your phone within arm's reach of you right now. Yes, that's right. I have eyes and ears everywhere. I can see you. I see your phone. So go grab it and send us a text. 913-407-6524 on the Mint Mobile hotline on KCSN. So, okay, before we dive too much into the game, I kind of just want to talk about Children's Mercy Park, right? Obviously, a lot of conversation in the offseason has been building a new stadium. You're going to be playing 2 games at Children's Mercy Park, 4 games at Arrowhead Stadium. So let's just start there. Children's Mercy Park, you and I were both there. What was kind of your thoughts on the experience, the atmosphere, sort of the fans, all of that throughout the game?
Yeah, we had great seats to pick up the atmosphere, right? Because with the way that Children's Mercy is set up, the spillover for the press area, is just outside, and so we had a great feeling for it. The acoustics really carry sound in that place. I thought, when the band was playing, I thought it was really loud. I thought the crowd was really loud to start off, and because of that, Nick, I think it was almost kind of the best of both worlds, right? Because we had talked coming out of the spring about how in the spring game, it was kind of cool seeing the spring showcase over at Rock Chalk Park because it was a more intimate atmosphere. Your sight lines were better than they would be typically, at Memorial Stadium. You felt closer and more in tune to the action, but you didn't know how having 20,000 people versus 45,000 plus people, how that was going to translate. And I thought, obviously the atmosphere died down when it became not so much a game and when both teams, actively seemed like they were playing college football with the chew clock mode on. But prior to that, I really thought it was the best of both worlds. You had a great atmosphere with a lot of noise and the things that you want to have for a home field, and yet at the same time, it was sort of that more intimate setting that we had talked about, where people had a great view of everything.
Yeah, and for those that have never been to Children's Mercy Park before, maybe for a sporting game or just hadn't been there before, it's kind of got these really long overhangs that surround about 3/4 into the stadium, and that really helps, I think, with creating a louder atmosphere because a lot of that sound stays in, I think. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. I thought the crowd was great. Mello Dodson made a point in post game to talk about how he's actually surprised that KU fans showed up, which I thought was pretty cool. And yeah, I thought pregame it was pretty cool. I went out early ahead of the game to try to get a sense of the tailgating experience, what that was going to be like, and I was pretty impressed at first. But then about 4:30 or 5 o'clock. Before the game, one of those nice Kansas thunderstorms decided to roll through, and it poured rain for a good probably 15-20 minutes, which seemed to maybe kind of literally and more metaphorically dampen the vibes.
It rained on your parade.
Yes, it did indeed rain on the parade. So if you were out tailgating, you probably experienced the same thing. I saw many people It was kind of funny because a massive gust of wind came in at first as the front of the storm. And so people immediately went to grab all their tents and like hold them down. And then it rained pretty briefly. So, and unfortunately, the worst part about that was I think people were probably hoping, oh, this rain will help make it not as hot. Well, instead it did the opposite. It just made it worse. So that was annoying as well. But yeah, so I tried to go out and get a general sense of the fan experience. I think it was overall pretty positive. Walking in the stadium, it seemed like people were enjoying things. The one thing I will say, and I'm curious about if anybody that also went to the game wants to share a comment or text us on the memorable hotline, is they did not exactly make finding where you're supposed to park very easy at all. There was a lot of roads that were blocked off. There were people that were seemingly directing people in different directions. I heard from one fan who said that like 40 people directed him down 3 different roads and they were all wrong. So that's something to maybe keep in mind. I guess is that, I don't know. I'm curious if people had the same experience or if people were able to find sort of where they were supposed to go parking wise, fairly easy or easier, I guess I should say. But yeah, overall, I think if you're Travis Goff, if you're Lance Leipold, if you're KU, you got to be probably pretty happy, I think, with how this first game turned out in terms of the fan experience. My only real criticism, and this is just a me thing, is we can do away with the fireworks guy. The first time that went off, I about jumped out of my shorts. It was horrible. Every time it went off, it was not fun. I did not enjoy it. I think we can, hey, Travis, we could probably go ahead and get that guy for the UNLV. That's just my opinion. I understand we people feel differently, but other than that, it was great. They did some on-field pyro stuff. The flyover was obviously, I thought, really cool as well. So I think they did a great job overall of sort of keeping the same fan experience that you would have gotten at Memorial Stadium at Children's Mercy Park, which was cool. So overall, again, I think you probably got to be happy if you're Travis Scott at this point with the first game.
Yeah, you have to be. I think, like you said, there were some bumps in the road or whatever else, whether it was the weather, whether it was the parking. I don't know when you pulled in what your experience was. I 100% had the guy direct me kind of in the wrong way to get to where I needed to go. But at the same time, it turned out really, really well. I thought it was a beautiful but extremely hot and humid night for college football. But once that sun started going down, it was pretty nice out there. Had a nice little breeze to it too. And the thing is, Nick, is we only got one more game at Children's Mercy. The UNLV game, and then the other games will be at Arrowhead. And Arrowhead has one of the easiest parking lots to navigate in terms of when you go in and. You've got 35 people pointing you directly to your very specific parking spot. And so I'm sure they'll iron out the kinks for the second game at Children's Mercy and then on to Arrowhead.
Yeah. So, okay, let's get into the game a little bit here then with KU taking on Lindenwood. The betting line we talked about, and I think on our previous show, it opened at like 43, it goes up to like 48. Everyone's hammering KU. Lindenwood is being touted as like one of the worst teams ever. And the start of the game did not really indicate that. To begin with, it really did actually to start. KU pretty much effortlessly, after a 3-and-out, went right down the field. Devin Neal doing his thing, averaging about 12 yards a carry, and he goes in and scores again. And it's become tradition at this point that Devin Neal is the guy that scores the opening touchdown for KU of the season, it would seem.
Three straight years, right? That he has scored the opening touchdown. And so you almost, at this point, it almost feels like he should come back next year and do it in a ceremonial role or something, just to make sure things keep going that way. But no, and one of the other things I thought that was really interesting on that first drive, Nick, was they took 2 shots down the field on back-to-back plays. Both were great balls by Jalen Daniels. Didn't result in a completion. I thought, the one to Quentin Skinner, I thought the defensive back made a pretty good play on. It was in Skinner's hands, but, he kind of fought through the catch, and Skinner, wasn't able to control it before he kind of went out of bounds and landed on the ground. And the other one to Luke Grimm. And I think, while both of those fell incomplete, you felt like, hey, like Jalen's not showing a whole lot of rust here. Like those are two really good balls in those situations. Kansas actually wound up going for it on a fourth down, and they ran sort of this little concept that was like a little rub route where you had one guy, kind of running a short, in, another guy running a short out, and he hit the out to Luke Grimm. It was the same play that out of a different formation that they wound up running later on a fourth down to convert, but they converted the fourth down, went in and scored, and you at that point you're saying, hey, can't get any better than this. 3 and out straight into a touchdown. Great start to the season.
Yeah, at that point I was thinking, okay, Kansas is going to win this game by a lot of points as that unfolded. But then, there was kind of some influence of the game, and we'll get more into that after a break. But first, do always have to tell you about our friends at Home Field Apparel. You can head to homefieldapparel.com right now and get 15% off your first order using promo code PAYHEAT24. They've got their exclusive football boxes. They've got tons of Kansas items. My Youngstown State shirt is shipped, I believe, so hopefully I'll have that soon to rep my boy Dylan Westky, who got a lot of play, by the way, in this game for KU. I've got the Kansas. I'm just got the Jayhawks one on right now, as always, to rep KU with Home Field Apparel. So head over to homefieldapparel.com. Use promo code PAYHEAT24, 15% off your first order. More KU football talk coming up next.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
This is the podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer along with Kevin Flaherty. Look, folks, we get you a discount on Home Field Apparel if you're going to go over there and shop at homefieldapparel.com. But how would you like to have an initial $500? Also, you can go to BlueWirePods.com/survey, complete the Blue Wire audience survey about you and your podcast listening habits for a chance to win a $500 gift card. By taking this survey, you help create a better advertising experience for audiences and, in turn, help us here on the show on PayE. So go to BlueWirePods.com/survey where all you have to do is answer some simple questions for a chance to win $500. Make sure to read the full terms and disclaimer and click the survey for a chance to win. That's BlueWirePods.com/survey. And the link is also in the show notes of this episode. Okay, so KU's up 7-0. Like I said, at this point, I'm thinking this could get really bad really quick for Lindenwood. But then you hit definitely probably the worst section of the game for KU. Lindenwood gets the ball, and they're able to move it pretty well. But then we finally get a chance to see Dean Miller make this huge play. Obviously, he's been a guy there's been so much talk about him over the summer and fall camp. And I finally got a chance to see him make a huge play on a fourth down. He gets a big sack to get the ball back to Kansas. And he talked a little bit about that play and how he didn't even really know what to do after he got the sack. He just kind of like did his thing. But he did make sure to mention, Dean Miller did in postgame, that he does indeed have a sack celebration that he has supposedly been in the lab working on, that we may see at some point later in the season. But for the first one, he just kind of exploded with emotion. But certainly great to see. I mean, this is a guy that, he talked about it. Lance Leipold has talked about it in the spring. Lance Leipold said, look, you're not going to play here if you don't, bulk up, if you don't increase your size. And it's clear that he has put in the hard work and dedication to make that happen. And so I think just to see him out there making plays, right, that's what you want to see. Because at this point, obviously, you've got some really, really talented young players at the defensive end position, but no Austin Booker. You need somebody that can be sort of that impact player in key moments, and Dean Miller maybe looks like he could become that guy.
Yeah, and one of the encouraging things about that play was 3 different guys could have gotten the sack there. Dean Miller absolutely annihilated the offensive tackle to get the sack. But Jeremy Robinson was only a half step behind him, and maybe at about the same time as Jeremy Robinson, or a quarter step behind Jeremy Robinson, was DJ Withers getting through it. And so, on that fourth down, Kansas pass rush absolutely got home. But Nick, we were talking, sitting up there next to each other, and you wanted to see Dean hold up against the run, right? Because that was a big part of, will this guy get to play and what will his role be? Ever since he arrived at Kansas, will he be able to add the bulk, the strength, maintain the weight that he needs to hold up against the run at that defensive end spot. But I think you even mentioned it, at the time, where you really wanted to see him stand out was, hey, you are an athletic guy. When it's in a pass rush situation, like, this is where I want to see you shine. Like, this is where I want to see why you're on the football field. And on that play, he certainly did that.
Yeah, absolutely. And really great to see, like you said. And the one thing is, just looking at him on the field, he still looks kind of small. I don't know if small is not the right term, but maybe not quite the same size as the other guys, which is fine, I guess. We'll see. I maybe, projecting long-term throughout the course of Big 12 play, I have a little bit of concern about teams maybe trying to exploit that, especially on the ground game, but for now, in this game against Lindenwood, he looked good, right? The speed rush was really effective pretty much all night long from not just Dean Miller, but from other guys, Deshaun Warner got a lot of playing time. DJ Warner, the freshman, he was out there quite a bit early and often. Got out there actually on the second defensive series, I believe, for about 3 or 4 plays for KU. So he was out there early and often. And I mentioned to you about DJ Warner is that, like we talked about with D. Miller, who we wanted to see flash, DJ Warner did not flash, but he certainly wasn't making any real mistakes, right? Like he was doing his job most of the time, which is fine to see from a freshman. But he didn't really flash at all, which, again, it's not a bad thing at all. I don't want to paint that as something that's negative. But because I thought he overall probably did pretty well. I'd be curious to sort of be a fly on the wall in the film room, breaking down that, to see if he kind of did what KU hoped he was going to do out there. But he got a lot of playing time, and so did some other freshmen. Later in the game, Jalen Todd got in quite a bit. We get to see Harris Stewart as well at the running back position. The one guy we did not see was Zeke Marshall, and Lance Leipold kind of spoke on that a little bit in postgame, talked about how Ben Easter's got his chance against Cincinnati last year, and they kind of wanted to give Mikey Pauley a chance, I guess, to play at this point. And, if you want to kind of go tinfoil hat on this and sort of, try to mega outbrain yourself, forward playing 4D chess, if KU plans to redshirt Zeke Marshall, you only get 4 games to play him in. And if you wanted to sort of, extrapolate that thought out, why would you burn one of the 4 games you could play him in if you want to spare his red shirt in a game where you're just going to be running the ball straight up the middle? Because that's all Mikey Pauley did. He just ran the ball straight up the middle every play. So, I don't know. It's a little weird, I guess. I don't want anybody to sit back and think, well, Zeke Marshall, is he not very good? Like, why could he not play? Like, I don't think that's the case at all. But I don't know. I think it might have been just a situation where Lance Leipold said, "Hey, we want to let Mikey Pauley get on the field." I guess.
Yeah, and I thought that was kind of an interesting discussion that he had, after the game when he was talking about that decision, and he basically, made it sound like it was kind of a spur of the moment thing. Like, hey, we wanted to get Zeke out there, but in that situation, we were kind of like, let's save the 4 games. Let's go ahead and get Mikey Pauley out there. And so, like you said, it's not any sort of indictment on Zeke or anything like that. It does make sense probably to some extent to, hey, if you're going to get him the 4 games, get him games in different situations than what it was, last night. And so I do think that he's somebody that it wouldn't surprise me at all if we saw him at times this year, just not on Thursday night.
So I mentioned the probably the bumpiest part of the game for KU happened in the late first quarter, early second quarter. They get the stop on downs, but then you get a big play to Quentin Skinner, and he fumbled. And even in the stadium at the time, I think there was some confusion because they kind of showed a replay on the video board, and it looked like he maybe might have been down, or it certainly looked like it was a play that warranted a review. And then they just kind of moved on. And Lance Leipold actually post-game said that, or made the claim that I guess the replay was down or something, or they didn't have the replay capabilities at that time. Which was kind of a very bizarre moment. I don't really know how that works. Like, if we've got a replay on the video board, how do we not have a replay we can look at? I don't know. It seemed a bit strange, but the end result was that it was a fumble, and Lindenwood took over. Had to punt again, though. Kansas defense was pretty great all night. And then you have the interception from Jalen Daniels on a throw where just a total miscommunication with Luke Grimm, where he was kind of streaking on the sideline, and I think Jalen Daniels expected to come back. It ends up being a pick for Lindenwood. Jalen Daniels said post-game, hey, totally my fault. Luke Grimm read the coverage correctly. I didn't, and it happens. And look, those are the types of things that I don't want to say you expect to happen, but Jalen Daniels hasn't been in a game in, almost a year. And those plays can happen, right? And I think it's okay that it happened in this game, though. Just don't let it happen again, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, too, I'm not sure it was the right decision, even if he had read it the way that Luke Grimm read it, too. The safety was right there over the top. You would have been pinching that ball into a really small window, even if you didn't throw the comeback, and instead threw kind of the go that Luke Grimm wound up running. But yeah, I mean, you expect some rust in a first game. You expect some things to go wrong or whatever else, and it did go wrong. Jalen, though, wound up bouncing back. The unfortunate thing, I think, with the way that the game played out was I'm not sure Jalen's numbers reflect how good he really was, because I do think that, he probably had 2 or 3 throws on shot plays that could have been catches and weren't. And so you look at the Devin Neal stat line at the end of the game, the 8 carries for 112 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jalen very easily, I feel like, could have had the quarterback version of that, where you complete a really high percentage of your passes, multiple touchdowns compared to how your throws went. It was just that wasn't the way that it wound up working out in terms of guys completing catches.
Yeah, Kansas in the second quarter discovered that, hey, we can get 12 yards a carry. Just run the ball. And that's kind of what they did on their next drive with Devin Neal. He had a 53-yard run down the near sideline on the right side. Daniel Highshaw got some runs, had a couple long runs, and then Devin Neal capped it off with a touchdown to make it 14-0. And at that point, you felt like, okay, Kansas has shaken off sort of whatever happened to them with the 2 turnovers on back-to-back drives. Things are looking good. And then things got even better for Kansas off of an immediate pick 6 moments later with Mello Dotson. And yeah, I mean, Kobe Bryant has been getting a lot of the fanfare, but Mello Dotson, man, he seems to be right there in terms of his ability. He kind of broke down that play in the postgame, talked about how, hey, I saw that the quarterback was signaling to his receiver that he wanted him to run a specific route, so I was expecting that the ball was going to be coming my way. And then when I saw him break, I kind of knew that's what it's going to be, and he just took it to the house. And yeah, that's just what he does. Dean Miller said post-game, hey, that's just what Mello does. And it's kind of true at this point. That's just what he does with the pick 6. Great play. Now, there was an unfortunate thing that happened after this touchdown, though, from Kansas, and that was the missed extra point. Womp womp. Pretty unfortunate. Tabor Allen, by the way, was an in-starting kicker. I think we talked about that on our preview show. The starting place kicker for KU, who had been doing handling kickoff duties for the past couple of years. Missed the extra point here. Other than that, he was pretty fine. We didn't see him attempt any field goals beyond extra points. So I'm not going to hit the panic button immediately off of one missed extra point. But obviously, I think it's something that is worth noting because I think Lance Leipold, at least publicly, has taken a very rosy view of the special team situation for KU. I'm not taking that view so much as Lance is. Again, that's not to say that I'm panicking about the special teams, but we talked about it. You look back at a couple of games last season, and that, whether it was place kicking or, fielding punts, whatever XYZ, special teams did hurt Kansas objectively in some games that they all ended up losing. So, I don't know. Noteworthy to say the least. So, at that point, it's 20-0 Kansas. Again, Lindenwood really could get nothing going all night. They were unable to run the ball and completely. They had a hard time passing as well. So, Kansas would get the ball back again. And again, they would go on another touchdown drive. This one, I guess you could hardly call it a drive because it was only 3 plays with Jalen Daniels going up top to Luke Grimm. And I want to take this moment to talk about Jeff Grimes a little bit and sort of what we saw from his play calling game. I think it's pretty clear that Jeff Grimes stepped into the facility and realized, wait a minute, we've got 3 elite receivers, and Jalen Daniels is our quarterback. Let's throw the ball because he really fell in love with throwing the ball and getting the ball in some of the receivers' hands. Lawrence Arnold had a catch early in the game, and then I think had one later, but Quentin Skinner and Luke Grimm specifically both were getting the ball early and often, and Luke Grimm obviously had a great game, over 100 yards and a touchdown. And on this play, I mean, just a straight post where he just blows by his man off play action for a touchdown. Jalen Daniels, this was, I know you want to talk about a throw later on, but this was maybe his best throw of the night in terms of putting it right on Luke Grimm in stride down the field for a touchdown.
Yeah, I think that when you look at the way the offense went over the course of the night, I think 2 things stood out. One, I don't want to say vanilla is maybe too strong, but Kansas kept it relatively simple in terms of what they showed, except that they showed a lot of complexity in terms of a lot of different looks. You got some spread concept stuff. You got 4 tight end stuff. You got the jet sweeps that we've talked about on this show that were going to be a Jeff Grimes staple. You got to see, some different 4th down things. And so when you look at the receivers in particular, they got a lot of shot plays, right? It wasn't just that, hey, he's targeting these guys a bunch. They're targeting these guys down the field and trusting them to go make a play. And yeah, I talked about how Jalen maybe was a little bit hurt by the fact that maybe a couple catches weren't made or whatever. They weren't outright, drops. They would have been tough catches. But you think about where the receivers were a year ago, they all had, I think, catches that made SportsCenter's top 10 plays. And so those are the kinds of plays that you trust those guys to go out and make sometimes. And so as the receivers, we talked to them all through camp. You could hear the excitement that, hey, one of the things that we like about the quote-unquote new offense is that we're going to get our chances, and I think that played out on the football field.
Yeah, so Luke Grimm with a deep touchdown, great connection there from Jalen Daniels. And at this point, Kansas is pretty much back on track. It's 27-0 at this point after the touchdown from Luke Grimm. Again, Lindenwood's really unable to do much. Kansas ends up getting the ball thrown 5, but that didn't matter. They go 95 yards down the field, a couple of long passes, a couple of long runs. Daniel Highshot, a long run. He gets rewarded with a touchdown to end it. And Kansas goes up 34-0 at the half over Lindenwood. And you're feeling much better than maybe you were earlier on in the first quarter and early second quarter. And the conversation at that point kind of turned to, okay, well, who's going to go out for the second half? Right? Are we going to see Jalen Daniels? Are we going to see some of the other starting players? Jalen Daniels was done. Devin Neal was also done at halftime. But we still didn't see a lot of the starting offensive linemen in the third quarter. We did see some of the starting receivers, Daniel Highshaw in the third quarter as well, with Cole Ballard leading the way for KU. And the success continued. I mentioned it. And, you almost have to put a caveat on a lot of the conversation, I think, around this game with Lindenwood, because KU's offensive line was able to pretty much steamroll guys down the field all night long. I don't know if that's going to be something KU's going to be able to do game in and game out. Obviously, it looked great in this game where you're averaging literally 8 yards a carry, essentially, with no matter who the running back was with the offensive line. So, that looked really good. But again, with the caveat of it being Lindenwood, still really nice to see, though, overall. And yeah, I think you mentioned it earlier, Kevin. In the second half, Kansas really just kind of turned into, hey, let's get some of the young guys some playing time, but we are very much going to be, running the clock. And they did that to open the second half with Savion Morrison getting 7 straight carries, I believe it was, down the field for KU to go score another touchdown. Savion Morrison did not get or he did get the touchdown. That's right. He did get the touchdown. Savion Morrison to cap it off with the touchdown for Kansas to make it 41-0. And yeah, like I said earlier, some of the young guys, they got out there on offense. Guys like Eddie Stewart, Doug Amelia will get a touchdown later on. You mentioned jet sweeps. Doug Amelia was a recipient of that on a jet sweep.
He was not the first Jeff Grimes jet sweep, yeah. I believe. So,
yep.
Quentin Skinner got one. Trevor Wilson got a screen, but not a jet sweep, right? Or did he get a jet sweep too?
I believe it's just a screen, yeah.
Yeah. So it was, but Doug Emelian is your winner for first.
And listen, I feel vindicated.
That sweet.
I love Doug Emelian. Listen, there are two players that I love more than anybody else. It's Savion Morrison and Doug Emelian. And both those guys got touchdowns. So this game was an A+, in my opinion. A+.
Well, you talked about the second half and then playing a lot of guys. It's important to note that before they were rotating guys in the first half, but not to that same extent. But at halftime, KU was averaging 10.5 yards a play, and Lindenwood was at 3. So that's kind of where I cut it off myself in terms of saying, okay, this was the first team's effort, even though they rotated different guys through. Like this was the first team versus the first team, and then in the second half, you got to see a lot of guys come through. Lance Leipold said after the game, about 75 players played. Nick, I counted them, 74. So very close to Lance Leipold. If he was in a contest where it's finish the closest but don't go over, he would have lost. But I say we go ahead and give him credit for pretty much nailing the number of players that wound up playing in that.
The first thought I had was in like elementary school, they'd have like the jar of marbles. Yes. How many marbles are in the jar?
Yeah.
Well, evidently would be pretty good at that, maybe. So because he was doing a good job counting the number of players going into the game. So yeah, I mean, really great to see that Kansas got about that amount of players in the game as well. We talked about Mikey Pauley coming in as well, also later on in the game, as Kansas just kind of, closed this one out. I think, let me ask you this. Does it matter to you at all that Kansas didn't get the shutout? Does that matter?
It doesn't necessarily. It would have been nice to have. I think it's one of those where you say, with a defensive effort like that, you really would have liked to finish that off, even if it was, rotating through a bunch of young guys at that point. I think you still would have liked to close that out. So ultimately, it didn't matter. It probably mattered to people of a certain betting persuasion, because if you got the opening line, it was 43.5 or right around there, 43. It wound up pushing all the way up to 48.5, 49. And so you think about the line would have, stair-stepped into that basically. So I'm sure there were some people that probably sat around 46, 47 who were just full of despair to see that field goal go through and then see Kansas, continue to run clock after that, saying, no, throw it down the field, get the margin here. But sorry if you didn't get that early line on there, because that field goal could have stung from that standpoint.
By the way, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the field goal drive that Lindenwood went on. I mean, this is Hall of Fame level of field goal drive from Lindenwood. 14 plays, 75 yards, over 7 minutes for a field goal.
Yeah, those are your favorite drives. I mean, for those who missed it, I would highly recommend going back. It was a lot of fun doing the Rewind series where we looked at every game from last year. And you will find that Nick's love for Savion Morrison and Doug Emelian is perhaps only eclipsed by really long drives that end in 3 points.
Yeah. And this was obviously, in this case, it was a sad field goal on top of that. They could have easily just gone, you could have gone for it, but, a sad field goal, I guess, at the end of the game always feels nice.
If you're in that situation, you're the Lindenwood coach. I know it sounds cliche. I know you got beaten pretty badly, but you do really want to just have some positive that you can pull out. And I'm sure that, talking to the players, it's kind of like, you went on a 14 play, 7-minute drive against a Big 12 team. Like you can do this. So shout out to Lindenwood and kudos for that field goal drive, even though it did break up the shutout.
One other guy that got some playing time later in the game that I failed to mention earlier, Bai Joe got out there as well. He had a lot of energy. He was banging his helmet after plays, all kinds of stuff. He seems to be a very fiery player on the field. So I like seeing him. He has been dealing with a bit of a wrist injury, I believe. He still had the club on his wrist going out there against Lindenwood, but But yeah, nice to see him as well get on the field. So overall, Kansas, I mean, I think people may look at the score, I guess, after like sort of the hype of, oh, hey, Lindenwood is this really bad team, Kansas, and the line getting bigger and bigger. I think people may look at the final score and say, oh, Kansas maybe isn't this good. That's not the case, obviously. I think there's, it is what it is. I mentioned it, in our pre-show. The score did not matter to me as much in this game as it maybe has in the past with Kansas and FCS schools, because of the fact that I trust that Kansas is of a certain level of prestige that the score doesn't matter. So there's that. And yeah, I would just say if you were scoreboard watching and you thought, oh, wow, Kansas only won by 45, it's not that big of a deal. Kansas, I think, is still perfectly fine. Jalen Daniels looked really good, I think, overall. Devin Neal obviously did his thing. The defense was considering the level of opponent, the defense was very good. You saw some rotation. You saw some flashes from guys you wanted to see flashes from.
Daniel Highshaw trucked over like 5 defenders on one run and almost killed a girl on the sidelines.
Yeah,
another
that happened also.
That was one of the more humorous moments. Not her getting run over, but in the post game press conference, talking to Lance Leipold about it, because he went over to check on her to make sure she was okay. And when he found out, hey, she's fine, he joked that he had talked to staff about finding out whether she had any eligibility.
Yeah, that's just classic Lance Leipold, man. Always thinking ahead. But yeah, luckily she was okay. Daniel Highshaw helped her up. Like you said, Lance Wilbur checked on her, so that was good. And yeah, like I said, just to kind of circle back to the start of the show, I think the fan experience overall was pretty positive from what I could tell. It was packed, it was pretty full. KU fans showed out, which was great. And I think overall the environment turned out pretty well. And now things will get very real for KU as they look ahead to Illinois going on the road, and they'll have to really step it up. Lance Leipold, classic Lance Leipold fashion, by the way, at the end of the game. Somebody asked him how he felt about the game, and he said, well, obviously there are things I didn't like, but overall, and then you got to watch everything you did like. So, I'm sure KU is going to be taking advantage of this. One other note that I wanted to mention about KU playing on this Thursday. I know for some fans, maybe people don't like it early in the year, but Lance Leipold gave a really interesting answer about this, sort of peeling back the curtain, not in post-game, but actually earlier in the week, talking about how he likes playing games early to start the season because it allows you to start camp earlier because you get a certain number of days. So you can actually start camp earlier because you play a game a day earlier. And then on top of that, and this is obviously significant for KU now heading into Illinois, you now get an extra 2 days essentially to prepare for Illinois, right?
Yep.
So, that's the way it's Leipold, the tactician that worked there, I think, thinking ahead and saying, hey, we can start camp earlier. We can get our players on campus earlier and start earlier if we play a game a day or two earlier. So I know from maybe from a fan perspective, it can get some moans and groans, but it's Lance the tactician at work, I think, with that one. And so now KU can sit back. They got some extra time to look at Illinois. The other thing to note though about that is Illinois also played on Thursday night, so both teams will be coming off the same level of rest heading into that game. Illinois played against Eastern Illinois on Thursday night also, so they will both have the same amount of rest. So KU's not going to really have any sort of quote-unquote rest advantage heading into that game against Illinois, but something to keep in mind. So.
Yeah, I think it was really smart, kind of how that played out and everything, and I think it gives you a chance not only to have those extra days to prepare, and again, Illinois has it too, but you can give bodies a chance to recover a little bit from that first game because it's kind of a shock to the system. I think going into that first game, and then two, you have extra days to clean up anything that you noticed in the first game where, hey, maybe we don't need this guy playing this many plays because he's not ready, or maybe we need to play this guy more because he showed something, and figuring out what's going right, what's going wrong. It did kind of crack me up, Lance, is saying, oh, things could always be better, because I think coaches in general, but especially I think Lance Leipold and a lot of process-oriented coaches, I don't want to say they hope for things to go wrong, Nick, but they are certainly happy when they get a win on one hand, and on the other, they have things that they can go into the film room and say, look, like, you can't continue to do this, and they can clean things up.
In terms of a player of the game, Devin Neal, right? I mean, he's got to be the player of the game on the tank, right?
Yeah, it's Devin Neal. I would say the defensively, it's Devin Neal, but Luke Grimm obviously had a very good game as well. Defensively, I thought, even though it doesn't show up in the individual numbers, I thought the defensive tackle group was outstanding. And I went ahead and rewatched the game and came away feeling the same way. Lindenwood, not only did they get nothing up the middle, but I thought that they really controlled the pocket, from a pass rush perspective. For the most part, quarterbacks didn't really have places to step up to try and get away from guys like Dean Miller buzzing the edge. And so I really thought the defensive tackle play overall was excellent, but probably Dean Miller, wouldn't you say, from the defensive side would be your defensive player of the game? I thought O.J. Burrows had a really good game too.
Yeah, I wanted to point out O.J. Burrows,
and of course Melo gets a pick six. So
Melo gets a pick six.
If we were playing college football 25 right now, Melo Dotson would get the defensive player of the game.
Yeah, O.J. Burrows is a good one to mention. He actually had a pick on the sidelines that he didn't get a foot down in bounds. He made a catch on. He made a couple of really nice hits to break up some passes throughout the game also. So I am very excited about O.J. Burrows. We saw Marvin Grant primarily playing that boundary corner safety position, the Cinco position that KU calls it. Another thing that was interesting was saw a lot of rotating on third downs where KU had Jimmy Brown out there and Cornell Wheeler out there on first and second down. And they would bring in Jason Gilliam on third down to maybe help out with extra pass coverage, I would think, in that case. So that was something that was kind of interesting to note early in the game as well. But yeah, overall, Kansas gets a big win. They take care of business. They beat Lindenwood. Rinse, repeat. Good job. This is what Power 4 programs are supposed to do. They're supposed to take care of business and beat FCS schools, regardless of the level of FCS school they are. So good job, I guess. Good job. And now you look ahead to Illinois on the road in Champaign. So once again, as always, you can share your thoughts with us in the comments on YouTube. If you want to send us a text on the KCSN and Mobile hotline, you can do that at 913-407-6524. Share your thoughts. Give us how you're feeling after the game with KU taking care of business against Lindenwood as KU now prepares for the Fighting Illini, Illinois. I've always wondered, Fighting Illini, what is that? What is it? Fighting Illini, what does that mean? Are they the Fighting Illinois people? I don't know. We'll do some research on that.
It's a Native American thing.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll get the research department on that to learn more, I guess, for next week. So that's about going to wrap it up for this edition of the Pay Podcast. As always, like I said, you can leave us a comment, like, subscribe, leave us 5-star rating and review as well. And we'll be back early next week to be breaking down KU and Illinois as Kansas 1-0 will go on the road for the first time in 2024 to take on the Fighting Illini. So be sure to check out that coming up later on early next week. But until then, have a great Labor Day weekend. If you're listening over the weekend, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer, and we will talk to you again soon. See ya.